PJ Mustipher attending Big Ten Media Days, so he's a standout on the defensive side up front. But other than him along the defensive line, a couple transfers come in, but a little bit thin coming into 2021 otherwise.
Yes, the D-line is, I'd probably say, the biggest question mark at this point, and that's even with Arnold Ebiketie being one of the edge rushers. I think Ebiketie will have a pretty solid year. I think he's going to, show the nation what he's made of and really impress NFL scouts. Unfortunately, it sounds like his fellow edge rusher, Adisa Isaac, has been spotted in a boot at practices lately. And the word is he may not see much playing time this year as a result. So, a thin unit just took a hit right there. So we'll see who ends up replacing him there. But, in the middle, you do have PJ Mustipher. I'm also pretty high on the other transfer coming in, Derek Tangelo. And Hakeem Beeman's another name to keep an eye on. He's seems like a guy who's ready to step up and really take the reins at defensive tackle. So there are definitely some guys that I think will make themselves household names by the end of the season. But it's definitely one of those positions though where if they already seem to have an issue with one guy. You have another guy or two go down, and suddenly it gets pretty dicey up front. Now, as far as the back seven, I'm feeling a little better about, and frankly, so is James Franklin, especially when it comes to the defensive back room, the cornerbacks especially. He's similar to the running back room. He says he would stack his corners up against any other programs out there. And with good reason. Got Tariq Castro-Fields coming back for an extra season thanks to COVID, and they've also added some guys. Johnny Dixon, South Carolina transfer. He very well may end up being the other starter. Then behind him, we got Marquise Wilson. Also got Keaton Ellis, who he did move to safety last year. Maybe he'll stick to safety, but he can also go back and play corner. And so, they got a lot to work with back there. And at the linebacker spot, they may not be deep necessarily, but I'm really excited to see what Brandon Smith and Curtis Jacobs especially do out there as starters. Jacobs really flashed his talent last season, especially towards the end. And Brandon Smith now in the Sam linebacker spot, he'll to allow him free reign to just go after the quarterback and on blitzes and just kind of fly around out there like LeVar Arrington used to. That it's going to be exciting to see. Brandon, I think, finally achieve his full potential on the field. And in the middle, we'll see. It'll be probably Ellis Brooks is going to get the start there. Jesse Luketa, we thought would be also in the mix, but it sounds as if now he's going to actually play on the defensive end, be more of a hybrid, like defensive end linebacker, like they call it a stand-up defensive end. Similar position that I remember Tim Shaw played back in the mid 2000s on a couple of those really good teams.
Tim May down the line, breaking down Penn State's defense for us. Jesse Luketa, 59 tackles, 2.5 tackles for loss, second on the team. Brandon Smith, of course, breakout guy as well, 57 tackles, 8 tackles for loss, couple sacks. And again, the defensive backfield should shine as well. So it's mostly about depth. You feel as though the talent is pretty stacked on the defensive side. And as you mentioned, just to run down the numbers of the contributions coming in through the transfer portal, Derek Tangelo at Duke has racked up over 100 tackles in his career at Duke, 12.5 tackles for loss and 4.5 sacks. And Ebiketie from Temple, 58 tackles, 10.5 tackles for loss. So these guys have played, you got to combine like 55 games out of these guys. So you get 2 experienced guys through the transfer portal. They played a lot of football.
Right, exactly. That's, when Franklin talked about being more aggressive in the transfer portal, this is precisely what he was seeking to do: add guys who have racked up stats at these other programs like Temple and Duke and Ebiketie and Tangelo, and bring them in to fill in some gaping holes, which I fully expect those guys to do. Of course, recruiting the best high school kids in the long run is what's going to help fill in those holes. But to immediately think of it like, you got a ship and you got a few holes it's causing the boat to sink a little bit. So you want to just quickly plug those in. And that's where, that's what the Ebiketie and Tangelo and, other transfers they brought in are helping to do. Just keep those holes plugged in and keep the boat from really starting to sink. So I think they will very much do that. I did forget to mention the cornerback room also got another addition officially in AJ Litton, former blue chip recruit at Florida State. He left the program in 2020 and came back up north to join the Penn State program. So we'll see what his role ends up being, if he ends up seeing the field as a corner, if he plays in special teams. But, it certainly can't hurt to have a, former blue chip guy joining your defensive back room.
And if you get into some tight games late, I don't know what to think about the kicking situation, because there were quite a few kicks missed last year, but those guys made kicks, in particular Jake Pinniger, the year before. So he's shown himself capable, and he did hit 9 of 13, although the two guys, including Jordan Stout, only 11 of 18.
Right. So, yeah, the kicking game was a bit of an adventure last year, to put it kindly. Jake wasn't quite as accurate as he was the year before. And, Jordan Stout also shaky, not just with the field goal kicking, but also with the punting. It was his first year taking over punting duties. And while he certainly's got the booming leg to put kickoffs into the end zone more often than not, I guess it's a little different when you're trying to, because punting is a little bit different than just doing kickoffs. So we'll see if he still keeps the punter's role, especially next season with Alex Bichetta, the nation's top punter, coming in with the 2022 class. He's from the same high school as Blake Gillikin was. So I think he's going to ultimately be, your punter going forward. And as far as the kicking game is concerned, I expect Pinniger to still be the guy for field goals within 40 yards, and Stout will do the field goals from 40 plus. But keep an eye on Sanders Sahadak, incoming freshman. He was the number one rated kicker, according to Cole's Kicking. And he brings a tremendous leg and accuracy. So I won't be surprised if he is pushing Jake or Jordan for one of the field goal kicking spots.
There's our Penn State rundown, courtesy Tim Aiden on the defensive side. Big Ten Media Days and recruiting with Penn State with the second-rated class in the country. As Tim outlined, don't necessarily expect it to stay there, but it's been well fortified as most likely a top 10 class with 21 hard commits. And I counted 8 of those players rated in the top 15 at their positions. So a quality class, and the numbers are there in terms of volume as well for 22 going forward. But one last parting shot here, Tim. We're talking 22 with the recruiting class, but looking at 2021, coming off a disappointing 2020. But this has been the school that has been closest in knocking off Ohio State, and of course accomplished that in 2016. What is the puncher's chance? What are the odds in 21?
I mean, I wouldn't hold my breath on coming out of Columbus with the win. But that being said, if there is a chance to shock Ohio State, like unexpected, this would probably be the year to do it, considering the fact that Ohio State, none of their returning quarterbacks have thrown a collegiate pass. And that's because it's the first time since 1952, I read. So, if you think Penn State's situation, as far as experience, is dire with nobody behind Cliff having thrown more than one collegiate pass, Ohio State's boat isn't that much better. But that being said, of course, I mean, I'm sure between C.J. Stroud and Kyle McCord, Jack Milton, one of them will emerge. And I think by late October, when Penn State and Ohio State meet, they'll certainly be in full midseason stride. So, I mean, that's why I say I don't hold my breath. But that being said, if we'll say if Yurcich if Cliff is adapting well to Yurcich's system and that offense is in sync by the time they go to Columbus, and if say the defense especially, I mean, I'll say it, for all the struggle the offense had early on last year, the defense was probably the absolute worst. I mean, I couldn't tell you how many times they seemed to be out of position or missing tackles, just so unlike a Penn State defense you're used to seeing. So if the defense is playing more to its potential and the offense is doing the same thing, I mean, if the team is really living up to what they're capable of, I wouldn't rule it out, especially if Ohio State ends up shooting themselves in the foot a few times. Because this is the thing, the talent disparity is still pretty wide between the two programs. So it's one of those things like, yes, Penn State's got to bring their A game. And Ohio State, though, also has to shoot itself in the foot a few times, and which Penn State would take advantage of. So who knows? I mean, if you ask me, I think Ohio State, just off the top of my head, I think Ohio State wins by, 10 to 14 points. But, that's why they play these games on the field and not on paper.
I don't think there's any question while people are looking at Oregon to knock off Ohio State possibly, and within the conference, Indiana, based on what happened last season, that Penn State has been the closest. It's not even been close in regards to the evaluation of everybody else in the Big Ten versus Ohio State. Penn State's been the one team to put them on the ropes, especially those, of course, 2017 and 18 games, and 19 to a certain extent. Tim Aiden, Black Shoe Diaries, SB Nation, breaking down the Nittany Lions for us. Will be intriguing to see if Penn State can bounce back here in 2021. Tim, we always appreciate the conversation and always look forward to seeing you.
Oh, sure thing, Mark. Thanks for having me.